I'm on the New Leaf board for 44 years, and they want me to give a history of the organization in 1 minute. There ain't no way. But I came on the board in February of 1972 because my mother needed somebody to fix the toilets and the roof at our facility because we had terrible real estate in those days. My mother was Dorothy Mitchell, who started New Leaf along with Larry Simmons. Larry was a brilliant psychologist who was a terrible businessman. My mother, Dorothy, was the head of drug abuse coordination for the city, for Mesa Public Schools, and she was very good with money, so they were a good partnership. She put together a board of people in the city who were good business people, and that's the way New Leaf has run forever. In those days it was prehab, which meant prehab, prevention, and rehabilitation. That name was thought up by Bob Petrie, who was a local attorney. Still involved with the organization is Alice Peterson. And Alice, we were a hands-on board because Alice made curtains for our residential facilities. She's been a wonderful board member ever since. Ann Elliott was a strong board member. She raised money like crazy, which we always need and we still need now.
In the beginning, back in beginning of '72, our whole family was trying to get donations. Dorothy was just trying to hit up everybody. We took pillowcases, we took sheets. I'm sure some people took beds. We donated a window air conditioner, and within a few months, I was out there teaching health classes. And that's just kind of how everything got rolling. We just all took our turns and tried to get everything together so this new prehab could start up. And our whole family was involved. Over the years, we went as a family to the Christmas parties. My kids were dragged along to everything. Today, my children are still very involved with New Leaf. One year we had the Christmas party and my parents were visiting, and the whole family was sitting at a table and I was off to the side playing Christmas carols on the piano. And it took my parents a good half hour to realize that I was the one supplying the music on the piano. So we just have little family stories like that, we just always been involved, and I'm very happy to be involved with the foundation.
Dorothy Mitchell, who was a friend, and she and Larry Simmons were the founders of Prehab of Arizona. And Dorothy is the only person in my lifetime that I've ever met that could convince me that if I didn't help the people she was asking me to, a lot of people would go without very special needs. So whatever Dorothy asked me to do, no matter how busy I was, I did. The first prehab board that I attended was at the old Urea home that was donated to prehab by the Urea family. And it had a barn and some buildings, some work buildings, and a house. And when I went into my board meeting, I was amazed because sitting around on the floor were several board members, people that I knew, like Billy Eaton and Dr. John Kerr and Alice Peterson and Colleen Thomas. And they were all sitting around on the floor and built on pillows in this little tiny space in the living room of this house. And it was very different than other board meetings that I'd gone to for other organizations. But by the time I left, I knew that it was a service that I wanted to be a part of. One incident that stayed in my mind when I think of Prehab of Arizona in the very beginning was I was teaching a health and hygiene class to the students, and this was again at the old Urea home on Main. And I had doctors coming in and teaching different segments, and I had one doctor coming in to teach about sexually transmitted diseases and how to prevent them. And I wasn't in the room, but when he came out, his face was red and he looked at me and he said, Mary Ann, those kids know more about sexually transmitted diseases than I do. And I looked at him and I said, well, that's why you're here, because they certainly knew more than I did.
I've been on the prehab board for many, many years. I think I joined in 1980 or thereabouts. And since that time, I've seen this organization grow from something really, really puny to something really magnificent. And it's been a joy. And it'll be, from a personal standpoint, one of the highlights that I can recall in my life. I remember the first time I ever attended, or one of the first times I ever attended a prehab board meeting. It was right before Michael Hughes joined the organization, and Kathy Jordan was still the honcho. And we met at some little house over here on University, which I understand is no longer there, in a little bitty room, which had enough room for seating of maybe 8 people, and we had 12 on the board, so we were taking up corners, and we were taking up edges of couches and stuff like that. And I recall that one of the first orders of business was that the board members got the unique privilege of signing a personal guarantee to help the organization raise money for working capital. Now, I'd started a business of my own several years ago, and so signing a personal guarantee for a bank loan was no big deal for me, but it was kind of unique in the area of organizations like prehab.
I joined the board in 1981, and that was 10 years after the organization was founded. And between my high school years and 1981, I graduated from college, I got married, and my young family was moving to Arizona from California. And Frank Bennett, Dorothy Mitchell's son, was our realtor. And Dorothy had died between the years when I was in high school and in 1981. And she was such a good friend of my mother's, and I was so intrigued by my memories of the founding of the organization. I asked Frank how it was doing, and he totally and completely lied to me, and he said, "It's doing great. It's fabulous. I'll have to invite you to come to a board meeting sometime." And I was a kid, and I didn't really know what a board meeting was, but I said, okay. And a couple of months later, he called me and he said, "We have a board meeting tomorrow morning at 7:30. I'm picking you up." And so he picked me up and we went to this house, this old house, the homestead residence, and we sat on pillows on the floor, and they were talking about this organization. And while I was there, they voted me on the board. He completely conned me and railroaded me into joining the board, and that was my first board meeting. One of my fondest memories of my family's involvement in the organization was at our annual dinner one time. And I was the treasurer of the organization, and before the keynote speaker, I stood up and I gave the treasurer's report. And we were pretty proud as an organization because our fund balance actually was 4 figures, and I think my first year as treasurer it was like $31. So we were feeling pretty good about ourselves. And the keynote speaker was my father, who was John Rhodes, and he was the House Minority Leader in the United States Congress at the time. And he was supposed to give us a great uplifting, rah-rah speech about our organization. And he completely embarrassed me by throwing his speech away and by talking about the treasurer's report and by talking about the poor financial health of the organization and lecturing everybody there that we needed to diversify our funding sources, that we needed to raise money, we needed to build an endowment, we needed to start a foundation, and we needed to find some way of protecting the organization against economic downturn and against government changes in funding so that the organization would survive. And right after that, we formed the Prehab Foundation, and the rest is history.